The most important thing to understand about Aegon's prophecy is that it changes the meaning of the conquest. In House of the Dragon, Viserys tells Rhaenyra that ambition was not the only reason Aegon invaded Westeros. Aegon dreamed of a terrible winter coming out of the distant north, carrying a darkness that would destroy the world of the living. He believed Westeros could survive only if the realm was united and a Targaryen strong enough to command it sat the Iron Throne. He called this warning the Song of Ice and Fire. That revelation comes from the television series, not from any passage in Fire and Blood, but it was not simply invented without George R.R. Martin. Showrunner Ryan Condal has explained that the idea of Aegon foreseeing the White Walkers came from Martin himself, so it is explicit show canon and may reflect part of the author's larger backstory, even though the published histories never confirm it. The prophecy is also less precise than people often remember. It does not name Jon Snow, Daenerys, or even the White Walkers. Aegon sees cold, darkness, and the end of mankind. His conclusion, that a Targaryen must rule a united Westeros, is his interpretation of the dream. And that distinction matters because later Targaryens repeatedly confuse prophecy with certainty. Hello everyone, and welcome to Storyteller's Codex. Here we delve deep into the rich lore of the Lord of the Rings, a song of ice and fire, and the vast worlds beyond. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Aegon's dream did not appear in a family with no history of prophecy. More than a century before the conquest, Daenys Targaryen dreamed that Valyria would be destroyed by fire. Her father, Einar, believed her, sold the family's holdings, and moved the Targaryens, their dragons, and their dependents to Dragonstone in 114 BC. 12 years later, the Doom destroyed Valyria. One correct dream saved the entire house. The Targaryens then remained on Dragonstone for roughly 100 years before Aegon crossed Blackwater Bay. That gap is important. They were not refugees who survived the Doom and immediately conquered Westeros. For generations, they controlled an island fortress at the western edge of the old Valyrian world, watched the kingdoms across the water, traded with them, and largely stayed out of their wars. Aegon himself visited parts of Westeros before the conquest, and commissioned the Painted Table, a map with no borders separating the kingdoms. The histories present that as political ambition. House of the Dragon adds a second explanation. After a century of waiting, Aegon saw a threat that no divided kingdom could face. In a family saved by Daenys' warning, dismissing another dragon dream would have seemed far more reckless than acting upon it. The conquest was fast, brutal, and incomplete. Harrenhal burned. Rhaenys and Orys Baratheon broke the Storm King's power. Aegon, Visenya, and Rhaenys destroyed the combined Lannister and Gardner army on the Field of Fire. The Vale submitted, Oldtown opened its gates, and only Dorne remained unconquered. Then Torrhen Stark marched south with around 30,000 Northmen. He had not lost a battle, but he had seen what Three Dragons did to a much larger army. After messages passed between the camps, Torrhen crossed the Trident and surrendered his crown without fighting. The straightforward explanation is already convincing. He saved thousands of his people from being burned alive. But Aegon's dream creates a fascinating possibility. House Stark remembered the long night, ruled the land beneath the wall, and used the words, "Winter is coming." Aegon needed the north inside his united realm more than any other kingdom. Could Aegon and Torrhen have discussed the threat beyond the wall before Torrhen knelt? There is no recorded conversation proving this, so it should remain a theory, not a hidden fact. Still, it would explain why the most distant king became the only one to surrender with his army completely intact. Torrhen may have understood that the crown mattered less than ensuring the north survived long enough to face the real war. If Aegon conquered Westeros to resist the Long Night, we should expect him to strengthen the wall immediately. Strangely, the surviving histories do not describe a major wall project by Aegon, Rhaenys, or Visenya. There is no confirmed royal visit, no new castle funded by the Conqueror, and no recorded warning delivered to the Night's Watch. Their connections are smaller. Visenya used the ancient vows of the Night's Watch as a model when she created the Kingsguard. That shows respect for the Order, but it did not add men or supplies to the wall. Under her son Maegor, roughly 150 defeated warriors' sons chose the Night's Watch instead of execution. Later, scores of poor fellows also took the black. Maegor strengthened the Watch accidentally while crushing the Faith. There is no evidence he was preparing for the others. Jacaerys was different. When he took the throne, more former enemies and prisoners went north, and his reign eventually produced the largest royal investment the Watch had received in centuries. Yet even here, the driving force was not the king at first, it was his queen. This is the first major answer to our question. Helping the Wall does not prove someone knew Aegon's secret, and knowing the secret does not guarantee they helped the Wall. The two lists overlap far less than they should. In 58 AC, Queen Alysanne travelled north during the royal progress of her husband, Jacaerys I. Jacaerys was delayed in King's Landing, so Alysanne flew ahead on Silverwing. She visited White Harbour and Winterfell, then continued to Castle Black. There she did something no recorded Targaryen had done before. She inspected the Wall and the Night's Watch for herself. Alysanne tried 3 times to fly Silverwing beyond the Wall. 3 times the dragon refused. Silverwing had crossed mountains, seas and storms, yet would not pass over that barrier. Alysanne wrote that the refusal troubled her deeply. This is one of the clearest signs that the Wall is more than frozen masonry, and it may have convinced the Queen that the old northern stories deserved attention. She toured the Watcher's castles, saw that the enormous Night Fort was too costly to maintain, and paid for a smaller replacement called Deep Lake with her own jewels and crown. Jacaerys then sent men to construct it. Alysanne also persuaded Jacaerys and Lord Alaric Stark to grant the Watch 25 additional leagues of land, creating the new gift. Snowgate was renamed Queensgate in her honour. Did Alysanne know Aegon's prophecy? Nothing confirms it, but no Targaryen before her did more for the Wall, and no dragon gave a clearer warning that something unnatural waited beyond it. Viserys tells Rhaenyra that Aegon's secret was passed from king to heir. That sounds like an unbroken chain, but the early succession makes it almost impossible to trace. Aegon I may have told his son Aenys. Aenys may have told Aegon the Uncrowned, who was killed by the usurper Maegor. Jacaerys then took the throne through another branch of the family. If the secret survived, someone outside the neat king-to-heir line must have carried it. Perhaps Visenya, Queen Alyssa, or Princess Rhaenyra. Under Jacaerys, the chain becomes easier to infer. His first heir was Prince Aemon, then Aemon's brother Balon the Brave, Viserys' father. If Viserys described the custom accurately, both men were probably told. Balon died before Jacaerys, and the Great Council later selected Viserys. Jacaerys could then have entrusted the warning directly to his new heir. This also clarifies the family names the video needs. Viserys' father was Balon the Brave, his grandfather was King Jacaerys I, while good Queen Alysanne was his grandmother. Jacaerys and Alysanne created the strongest defences, land grant and royal connection the Watch received during the Dragon Era. Only Viserys' knowledge is confirmed on screen. Aemon, Balon, Jacaerys, and Alysanne belong in the probable or possible category. Important links, but not people we can honestly label as proven keepers of the secret. Viserys explicitly tells Rhaenyra after naming her heir. He also shows her that Aegon's warning is hidden in High Valyrian on the Conqueror's dagger and revealed by heat. From that moment, Rhaenyra does not see the Iron Throne as only her inheritance. She believes holding the realm together is a duty tied to human survival. Daemon was not told by Viserys, which helps explain his anger when Rhaenyra reveals the secret. He initially treats prophecy as one more excuse for Viserys' weakness, but his visions at Harrenhal show the White Walkers, Bloodraven, and a future Targaryen queen with dragons. After that, Daemon accepts that the war for the throne is part of something larger. Rhaenyra eventually tells her own heir, Jacaerys. Jace is especially important because he has already travelled north, negotiated with Cregan Stark, and, in House of the Dragon, stood on the Wall itself. In the book, his alliance with Cregan becomes the Pact of Ice and Fire, though the histories never connect that pact to Aegon's dream. This leaves us with 3 confirmed keepers during the dance: Viserys, Rhaenyra, and Jacaerys, with Daemon learning outside the formal succession. Rhaenyra's younger sons are not known to have been told. Once the dance begins killing heirs, the family's secret becomes as vulnerable as its dragons. The Dance of the Dragons is probably where the formal chain breaks. Rhaenyra and Jace know the warning, but the war destroys the people most capable of passing it on. Aegon II was never Viserys' chosen heir, and there is no sign that his father told him. The conflict then leaves Rhaenyra's surviving son Aegon III as a traumatised child, ruling a realm without adult dragons. The book history adds an uncomfortable detail. Corlys Velaryon once suggested that defeated Greens be allowed to join the Night's Watch. Rhaenyra and Daemon refused to pardon them. Even two people connected to the larger prophecy allowed the civil war to matter more than reinforcing the wall. After the dance, we find Targaryen kings who send criminals or political enemies north, but no clear evidence that they preserve Aegon's exact warning. The Watch declines, castles empty, the gift loses population, and southern rulers increasingly treat the Order as a remote prison colony, guarding the realm from wildlings. That does not mean every later Targaryen forgot every prophecy. The prince that was promised, Azor Ahai, the dragon with 3 heads, and the Song of Ice and Fire survive as overlapping fragments. But Aegon's specific royal instruction, unite Westeros before darkness comes from the north, appears to vanish. The family keeps pieces of the song while forgetting what the song was meant to prepare them for. Nearly a century later, 3 Targaryens reconnect the dynasty to the wall. King Aegon V begins his reign during a 6-year winter and sends massive shipments of food and grain north. More importantly, he sends the Watch an extraordinary group of recruits. His brother Maester Aemon voluntarily takes the Black, while Brynden Rivers, Bloodraven, the legitimized son of Aegon IV, is sentenced to join. Around 200 prisoners, soldiers, and members of Bloodraven's Raven's Teeth travel with them. Aegon V clearly supported the North and strengthened the Watch, but there is no proof he knew the Long Night was returning. His later obsession with restoring dragons may have involved prophecy, yet connecting Summerhall directly to Aegon's dream would be speculation. Maester Aemon serves at Castle Black for roughly 7 decades. He studies the prophecies, corresponds with Rhaegar, and eventually realizes that the promised prince may be Daenerys, not Rhaegar or Rhaegar's son. Bloodraven becomes Lord Commander in 239 AC, disappears on a ranging beyond the wall, and survives as the last Greenseer beneath a weirwood. These two are stronger candidates than Aegon V. Aemon understood the prophetic tradition, while Bloodraven gained the supernatural knowledge needed to see the threat directly. Even if neither inherited Aegon's exact words, both rediscovered the war that their dynasty had forgotten. Rhaegar is the clearest later Targaryen to rediscover the Song of Ice and Fire. As a child, he preferred books to weapons, until something he read in his scrolls convinced him that he had to become a warrior. Maester Aemon initially believed Rhaegar was the prince that was promised because he was born amid the fire and tragedy of Summerhall. Rhaegar first agreed, then decided the prophecy referred to his infant son Aegon, and this is worth correcting precisely. Rhaegar does not say his son's son will be the Song of Ice and Fire. In Daenerys' vision, he looks at his own son Aegon and says, he is the prince that was promised, and his is the Song of Ice and Fire. He then adds that the dragon must have 3 heads. Rhaegar knew a decisive struggle was coming, but we cannot prove he recovered Aegon the Conqueror's complete dream, or understood that the enemy would cross the wall. He died fighting Robert, not the others. Aemon continued the search and finally turned his hopes toward Daenerys. In the television story, the last answer is brutally ironic. Daenerys brings dragons north, and Jon Snow, Rhaegar's hidden son, a Targaryen raised as a Stark, unites enemies against the dead. Neither sits securely on Aegon's throne when the Long Night arrives. Aegon correctly foresaw the danger, but his descendants misunderstood the part they were supposed to play. The bloodline mattered, possession of the Iron Throne did not. If you're interested in The Lord of the Rings or A Song of Ice and Fire, click one of the links on the screen to dive deeper into the lore. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you next time.